Good morning. Welcome to Zion Mennonite Church. It is good to have you here with us this morning. Thank you for joining us. I have a couple announcements for us. My name's Bill. I'm one of the pastors here. Janis here this morning as well. And then Frank will be bringing the sermon. There's a few other people in the building this morning as well, and you'll see them come and go this morning. Serenity is doing the worship leading. And Karen Tro has an announcement, and following these couple announcements I have. Next Sunday is the Sunday before Thanksgiving, just to catch you up on your calendars and where we're at in November. And in your bulletins, you'll see that we are doing a Thanksgiving celebration and inviting you to come by the church building next Sunday between 8:30 and 9:30 to just... Again, recognizing Thanksgiving, come pick up, we have a maple bar for each of you. And then also, one of the things we're doing this year for Advent is we're inviting families to have Advent candles in their homes. And so they're going to be available next Sunday to pick up because in 2 weeks is the first Sunday of Advent. So we are looking forward to that. But come next Sunday to celebrate Thanksgiving, grab a maple bar, and then also pick up Advent candles for you to have at home. Speaking of Christmas, the MYF is again doing a fundraiser with wreaths. You'll see that in your bulletins as well. If you still want to order a wreath, Serenity says today, you can still do that today. So please do that if you would like. These are, I understand these are gorgeous wreaths. Julie and I are getting one, so we're looking forward to that. All money is going to through Zion Mennonite Church. So if you're making a checkout, make a checkout to Zion Mennonite Church, but make sure you put a note on there that it's for the MYF wreath. And then pickup. They will be available November 29. And so Serenity is going to inform us of the address where Juana is at. She's making these for us, and we will pick those up there. So be looking for that information coming up. Now, Karen Tro will come. Karen's one of the elders here at Zion. She has an announcement for us. Karen.
Good morning, people of Zion. I'm getting some waves. The Zion leadership team has had extensive conversation about in-person Sunday morning worship service gatherings. We recognize the strong desire of many of you to meet. However, in light of the rising number of daily cases and hospitalizations due to COVID-19 infections, we cannot promote in-person services as safe. Though diligent mask wearing and physical distancing decrease the risk of spreading the virus, there still remains a possibility of infecting each other, which could result in serious illness and even death. As gatherings and travel from other communities increase over the holidays, we anticipate even more spread of infection, and for this reason, we will continue to hold remote-only services through the end of the year and into January. The leadership team will continue to assess and wrestle with how to meet together again in the new year. Please pray for us as we work to do church and support community over the next months.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. Good to see everybody. I am the worship leader this morning. And today, Frank is going to be the leader. You can see like just my head, so I'm short. The title of the sermon is called, there we go, Comfort and Perspective. I love words, so I thought I would read the definitions of those words. Comfort, a state of physical ease and freedom from pain or constraint. The easing or alleviation of a person's feelings of grief or distress. Perspective. The art, it's actually very much talking about art. The art of drawing solid objects on a two-dimensional surface so as to give the right impression of their height, width, depth, and position in relation to each other, when viewed from a particular point, a particular attitude toward or way of regarding something, or a point of view. And then it goes on to explain in perspective, showing the right relationship between visible objects. Out of perspective is showing the wrong relationship between visible objects. I take comfort in a lot of things, like a good cup of coffee in the morning, a quiet house in the morning before everybody wakes up, a good meal with my family, time with my kids, clothes, food, all these things that I can provide for myself, my friends, a good marriage. I have a nice house, a nice yard. I have a very comfortable life. This year, our lives have been very challenged, and I believe perspective is needed. Going back to the definition of perspective, is our attitude in or out of perspective? COVID-19, politics, racism, forest fires, mental health issues, children going to school at home, Zoom church, not getting to visit or hug my grandma, working at home or trying to work, knowing our children are struggling with school, holidays without family, face masks. I can go on and on and on. We need deep comfort and room to grieve and mourn. Please know how important this is for our souls. But as we near the end of 2020, and if I was my own mother, I would say this to myself: we must rise and say, challenge accepted. God asks us to look to Him for our comfort. The Spirit is sounding the alarm. He is offering us the opportunity to change the way that we've always done things. And He's giving us an opportunity to readjust our attitudes and minds to reflect His perspective. Things have slowed down for many of us. Will we gain new sight and seek God for our comfort? Let's use our time for His kingdom. Frank, or who's next? Music.
Praise to God, immortal praise, for the love that God is, bound to the forces of every joy, let every heart
it shall be given unto you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Hallelujah, hallelujah. First verse again. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
This time we will have the lighting of the Mercy, Justice, and Peace candle. While Julie is lighting that candle for us, listen to these words. God, in your mercy, may we indeed find comfort. God, in your justice, may we indeed find comfort. And God, in your peace, may we indeed find comfort. It is through the mercy, justice, and peace of God that we anticipate and look forward to the celebration of Jesus. Jesus who came as the baby that we celebrate at Christmas. Jesus who comes into our hearts to bring comfort, and Jesus who will come again. And now the children's story. We have the recorded story, Janis Miller. So we're ready for that.
This is the story about Jesus calming the storm. It's found in Mark 4. Jesus had been helping people all day long, and now he was tired. Jesus and his friends decided to get into the boat and sail to the other side of the lake. Jesus was very tired, and so he fell asleep. He lay down and fell asleep in the boat. While he was sleeping, the wind began to blow. The boat began to rock, and water splashed into the boat. The lightning flashed and thunder rolled, and the friends, the disciples, were shaking and scared. And finally they woke Jesus up. Jesus, help us! Jesus said, stop, be still. Jesus said to his friends, why are you afraid? I am with you. Let's say a prayer. Dear Jesus, no matter how small the boat or how big the storm, we do not need to be afraid when you are with us. Amen.
We are using the Isaiah 40, 21 through 31 today. Haven't you heard? Don't you understand? Are you deaf to the words of God? The words he gave before the world began? Are you so ignorant? God sits above the circle of the earth. The people below seem like grasshoppers to him. He spreads out the heavens like a curtain and makes his tent from them. He judges the great people of the world and brings them all to nothing. They hardly get started, barely taking root, when he blows on them and they wither. The wind carries them off like chaff. To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Look up into the heavens. Who created all of the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by name. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. O Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? O Israel, how can you say God ignores your rights? Have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not faint.
Hey, everybody. You all know me well enough by now. Am I on short view? Can we go back to medium person view? There we go. Thanks. Perfect. You guys know me well enough by now to know that one of the things I try to do on a Sunday morning is keep my emotions under control. It's always tricky for me, and you've wrecked it. Serenity's call to worship was spot on for what I want to talk about this morning. And even though Karen was kind of a killjoy this morning, a nice roll, she's absolutely right. Certainly the way that we worship together has really pivoted and changed. But as she was speaking, I thought to myself, this thought entered my head, who we worship has not changed. We worship a powerful God. And so killjoy messed me up right there. So I get to share some thoughts this morning on Isaiah, and I'm pretty excited about it. In my study, it took me down a ton of goat paths, and they've been interesting and good. And the biggest issue I had this morning was trying to condense this into what I want to say today. And I was going to use this at the finish, and I decided to use it right at the beginning because I want it to be in the front of our heads. I'm going to see if I can do this. Can you all see that? It's probably backwards, isn't it? Is it? Okay. And I'm probably yelling into the mic. Okay. So this is Hebrew, right? And I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but there's this really neat app on the internet where you can go to, and it'll give you the definitions of the words. And this is one of the phrases. And it gives you, you can push a little button and it'll pronounce it. And this is pronounced Yiko Kava Yahweh. Yiko Kava Yahweh. And this particular phrase is only used one time in the Old Testament, and it's used in this passage. Can you all guess which one it is? I think it's a key to this passage, and we're going to get to that a little later. And the root word of that is kava. That's a word I want you to remember as we go through this. I want to share an experience that I had that this passage reminded me of. Isaiah is definitely a poet. This is definitely poetry, strong poetry. And it reminded me of an event that happened to me when I was either 9 or 10 years old. And I think it's one of those universal things that happens to a lot of people. I think a lot of people experience this. But I was a weird little kid, so I probably experienced it in a weird way. But it was Christmas break, and it was cold, and it was beautiful, and it was clear, and there was no moon. And I went outside, bundled up in my coat, went out back behind the barn where it's darkest, and looked up into the sky at all of those beautiful stars and that darkness between them, all these things I didn't understand as a little kid, but it was just massive. I mean, it just looked massive to me. I remember standing there for a little bit and looking around, probably was getting a little bit scared, but was looking around, and I thought to myself, I don't amount to anything. I'm small. I felt tiny, insignificant. And so I looked around to make sure nobody was outside, like my brothers who would try to scare me, or my dad who was even worse. And I looked around, and then I spoke this out loud. I said, hey, God, do you even know I'm here? Do I matter at all? You know, I was like, Are you even aware that I exist? And I stood there quietly for a while, probably not very long because I was scared of the dark. And I listened. And you know what God said to me? Seriously? Nothing. Nothing. He didn't say anything to me. I went into the house kind of disappointed and dejected, and I went to bed that night, and I usually kind of prayed myself to sleep when I was a little kid. And I remember at the end of my prayer saying, hey, God, thanks for not saying anything. It probably would have scared the bejeebers out of me. But that's an experience that Isaiah is talking about here. Being out and acknowledging the power that's in the universe that we call God, and saying, where does that put us? What is our perspective? How should we think about our lives and our worlds based on that understanding of an all-powerful God? And to get there, and I promise I'll try to do this as fast as I can, I want to take a really quick run through Israeli history, right? Starting with Abraham. So most of you know these stories, but it's just a reminder, and I think it puts these verses into context. And it starts out with Abraham, who is this fairly unspectacular guy, not particularly obedient, not particularly bright, and probably I'll get killed for that by somebody, but just not all that, right? And God decides to bless him, and he says, I'm going to make a nation out of you. And in fact, God makes two nations, right? Nation of Israel and also the nation of Islam, claims Abraham as their patriarchal father. And they have one thing in common, Israel and Islam, they serve one God. One true God, and that would have been unique at that time. They call him by a different name. Israel called him Yahweh, they called him Allah, right? But very similar in the birthplace of where they came from. Fast forward 300 years, and this people group is starting to develop, right? And it gets all the way to Jacob, and with 4 different wives, he produces 12 sons that are the 12 tribes of Israel. Fast forward a little bit more, a few years later, and there's this nasty drought, this nasty famine, and this entire big people group just migrates over to Egypt, right? They become refugees in Egypt, and because their brother Joseph is there, they're fed, they get ground, they get land, and for about 100 years in Egypt, they really expand as a people. Lots of kids, lots of sheep, lots of all that stuff going on, until it gets to the point where the people of Egypt say, this people is too big. These people, if they raised up against it, they could wipe us out. So we need to do something. So they started taking their land. They started taxing their goods. Eventually, for the last 100 years of their presence there, conscribed them to slave labor, took everything that they had, took away all of their hope, and took away everything that they depended on as a people. Fast forward to Moses. Now we're 500 years away from Abraham, right? Fast forward to Moses, takes him out in the desert, and all of a sudden this people group is exactly like Abraham, completely dependent on God for their sustenance, for their protection, and for their provision. Completely dependent on God. And so after Moses' death, they begin to spread out as a people group, loosely defined under prophets and priests, and they become almost a tribal society, very much like what modern Afghanistan might look like right now, right? This very tribal group that's loosely banded together. Fast forward another 200 years, and they decide to start getting together. Let's not be all noisy out there. Fast forward, and they go to this Jerusalem council, right? They start to get together, these tribal leaders get together to discuss how they're going to begin to provide for themselves as a larger community, how they're going to protect themselves as a larger community. And this goes on for another 200 or 300 years. So there's 500 years from Moses to Samuel, right? Still with me? Okay, now we're at Samuel. They go to this tribal council in Jerusalem. And Samuel goes to them and says, you know what, I'm getting old, I'm getting tired. I need to pass this mantle of leadership, this prophetic leadership onto my 2 boys, and we need to continue this system. And to a word, this is in 1 Kings chapter 8. The people go, no. We're sick of a theocracy. We no longer want this kind of government. Give us a king. Because in this time that they're developing, the societies around them are developing as well. Up to the north, there's the Phoenicians and the Arameans. To the east, the Philistines and the Amalekites. To the west, or to the south, the Edomites. To the west, the Moabites and the Amorites. And it's just, if you look on a map, it's just this big circle of urbanized powerhouses with kings and armies and trade and wealth. And they feel threatened, right? They feel like their world is at risk again of going into some sort of slavery or being overtaken. And so they go to Samuel and say, give us a king. And Samuel goes to God and he says, God, these guys don't like me anymore, basically. And God comes to him. This is verse 7, chapter 8. I think it's one of the most pivotal verses in Israeli history and something that we should think very carefully about, because he says, Samuel, it's not you that they've rejected. It's not even this system that they've rejected. They've rejected me as their king. The ultimate act of idolatry, right? We no longer trust God to care for us and provide for us. We want a king. We want to be like the other nations, right? So God says, you know what? Give it to them. But before you give it to them, warn them that they're not going to like the way it turns out, because kings, as they always do, will tax you. They'll take your best herds. They'll take your best crops. They'll take your sons to be soldiers, and they'll take your daughters to be handmaidens or concubines, or something worse. Happens every single time. God says, go tell them that. So Samuel tells them, and they say, we don't care. We're sick of this. We want a king. Keep that in your mind when we get to Isaiah, because he's aware of all this. And then fast forward through the kings that we have. And I'm not going to go deep into this because I'm running out of time. We've got Saul, we've got David, we've got Solomon, all having some sort of different level of success. But Solomon in particular, conscribes his own people into slavery for a month of every year. And he takes 25% of everything that they have. And when Solomon dies, he puts his son on the throne, Rehoboam, and the people come to him, particularly, what's his name? Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Jeroboam comes, who's kind of a representative of the southern kingdoms. And he comes up for those 10 tribes and he says, you know what? You know, your father built all this stuff. He built a temple. He built a great house for himself. He's given us security. Now lighten up the yoke. Lighten up the burden of this kingship. So Rehoboam says, go ahead, go away. Come back in 3 days and I'll let you know. So Rehoboam goes to his dad's council and they say, you know what? Those people are right. It's time to reduce this load. Let the people be treated more fairly, more equitably. Let the people enjoy some of the fruits of their own labor. And then Rehoboam goes to his council and they say, are you kidding me? We got a sweet deal going here. We've got a great deal going here and we want more. And so Rehoboam's answer to Jeroboam, and this, talk about a disturbing image. He goes to Rehoboam like this. You see my little finger? See my little finger? That's thicker than my father's whole waist. He's saying, I am this much better than my dad, and I'm not going to reduce that burden. I'm going to increase that burden. And indeed he did. And that's what separated the kingdoms. Fast forward now, 200 years later, 180 years later, and the southern kingdom is beginning to fall apart. And here we get to Isaiah, okay? We finally got to the meat of this. We get to Isaiah, and Isaiah is prophesying to the northern kingdom as well as the southern kingdom. And at that same time, there would be guys like Amos and Micah and Hosea that are prophesying. And if you look at what they're writing, Jana hit this last week, and I think it's important to remember, the first 39 chapters of Isaiah really are one book. They're one type of book. There's a 2 or 3 year break between when he starts writing again, and those second 36 chapters are another book. The first 36 or 39 chapters are really looking at what's wrong with the social systems that they're living in. And there's 2 major issues. One is idolatry, and the other is clearly social injustice. It's social injustice. And if you want a book about social injustice, boy, read Amos. It is spot on. He tears into the way not just kings treat their people, but the way people treat each other. And those are the 2 tremendous crimes that are going on at that time that are causing these kingdoms to fall apart. That's worth noting too. And it's important to notice when I get into the text of this. So social justice in Isaiah and the other prophets of the time was extremely important and a cause of why their societies were falling apart. Okay, so that brings us to the text. We've got these first 39 chapters of Isaiah saying, this is what's wrong with you. And then we've got these next 36 that say, this is where your hope is. This is where you can place your hope. And he starts like this. You've heard it read. Don't you know? Haven't you heard? Haven't you been taught this from the beginning? Isn't this something that you've understood before the foundations of the earth? Think about that phrase. Isn't this something you've understood since before the foundation of the earth? What is he saying? I don't think it's unimportant. I don't think it's just poetic. He's saying this is something that you know inside, innately, internally. It's a knowledge you get for free, not one you have to pick up. And it's one you have to reject rather than receive. Paul, the Apostle Paul in Romans, I won't go down this goat trail, but read Romans 1. He uses the same construct when he defines all of the evil that's going on in the world. And he says people had to reject God to get to this place. They had to push him out. Evangelicals kind of think, yeah, we receive Jesus and his knowledge and his grace and all that. I'm not sure that's the best construct. We know God in our hearts. We have to push him out to become bad. And I think that's what he's saying here. So what's this important thing that we know? That God sits on a throne that encircles the earth within the cosmos. He even says it like this. He says he just takes all those stars and all that universe and he just wraps himself around it like a tent. Just, he's got all that. And from that position, we must look tiny, like grasshoppers or ants running around to God. We're just little bits of nothing. Well, why is that perspective important? This is where I'm probably going to get in trouble with some of you. Isaiah says he brings the leaders to nothing. He brings the leaders to nothing. The kings, the princes, the dictators, the queens, the senators, the presidents. They're nothing. They don't matter. Before they even cast out their seed or before they even start to take root, God just blows on them. They dry up, wither away, and get cast out. Why is that important? It's perspective, right? The very next line is, who are these people when you compare them to me? Why are you worrying about them? How are they my equal? They're not. They don't matter. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't invest ourselves in what's true and what's right and what's just and what's good. But should we ever put our hope in a king? Never. Should we ever fear a king and get all stressed out and bent out of shape? My perspective is I don't think so. I think that's what he's saying here. And then he gives us some advice. He says, you're getting torqued out about some king, go outside. Go to the next verse. Go outside, look up to the heavens and ask yourself, who made all this? Who brings it all out? Who knows every star by name? Whose power and might make sure that nothing goes missing? Isn't the king? Isn't the president? He's saying, be sure you place your fear and your hopes in the right spot first. So that's kind of a little bit hard. And so you go to the next question that would be the natural question. It's the one I asked when I was a little kid. It's like, hey, God, what about me? You know, why is my way hidden? Why is your way hidden from me? Why can't I understand it? And have you completely forgotten about me? And Isaiah goes back to the same construct. He says, listen, this is something you already know. The Lord is the everlasting God. He created the ends of the earth. And guess what? He doesn't wear out. He doesn't get tired. Doesn't take a nap. He doesn't fail to pay attention. He knows it all. He's got it all, and it's right there in his hands. It's right there in his hands. All of this stuff that's bothering us in 2020, he's got it. He's got it. We might not understand how he's got it. We might not like the way he's got it, but he's got it. And so what does he do? What does he tell us? He says, I've got a gift for you. If you're weary, I will give you strength. And if you feel powerless, I will give you power. That's God's gift in this passage. But the next verse is the one that I think is the most important to me. Everybody gets worn out, right? doing the work of God, doing the work of the world, doing whatever work you're doing, we get worn out, right? Everybody gets worn out. But then we have something that we can do, because this phrase that I showed you earlier, I'm not sure I can say it again, Yiko Kava Yahweh, is translated in English, personally, I think incorrectly, but I'll get there. It's translated as those who put their hope in the Lord, or those who put their trust in the Lord, or more likely, those who wait on the Lord patiently. Because this root word kava, its initial meaning is to wait patiently on, to wait for. But there's a secondary meaning that I actually think Isaiah meant, because kava also means to bind together like a rope, or a cord, or a cable, to bind together, to unite together, not to connect with, but to wrap around. And if you think about that verse in this way, it's saying, those of you who will wrap yourselves around God, you will have renewed strength. Kava means to wrap around, to become one with. And fortunately, we live in a new covenant where doing that, we get to do it through Christ and through the Holy Spirit to wrap ourselves around God. And when we do that, that's when our strength is renewed. That's when we can run and not wear out. That's when we can walk and not grow weary. So kava gives us our comfort. Kava gives us our hope. Kava gives us our purpose and our peace and our joy. That is a perspective on life we live with God. Amen.
Take your cross to Jesus.
so good to see.
A friend sent this to me. Thanks. Here we go. Okay, it's like, there we go.
We love short people.
A friend sent this to me this week, and it spoke to my heart, and I hope it does for you. Lifts your spirits and sends you into this next week with a new sight. May God give you rest on all sides. May Jesus lead you into a season of replenishment and restoration. May your good days outnumber your bad days. May your dreams speak louder than your fears. Where once you continue, sorry. Where once you continually braced for impact, can you read through?
I'll finish Serenity's words this morning. Where once you continually brace for impact, may you now live with holy expectancy, knowing that God gives good gifts to his children, even during tumultuous times. He never stops being God, and you never stop being his beloved child. May every trial you've endured serve you well in the days ahead. May your healed heart speak to those who are still in the storm. May your wisdom guide them safely through their battle. May your sleep be sweet and your rest restorative, your work be fruitful, and your laughter come from your toes. May God work wonders in your life even now. God bless you. God be with you. Go in peace.